When we think about the geopolitical map of Asia, our eyes usually go straight to the massive land borders between superpowers, right? Or maybe to the heavily contested waters of the South China Sea. But if you look far away from the mainland, quietly sitting out of the mainstream spotlight, there's a geographical anomaly that acts as the absolute linchpin for the entire region's maritime security. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack the strategic secret of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a place military strategists often call an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
To really get why these islands are so valuable, you first have to wrap your head around their sheer scale and their really unusual placement. We're talking about an archipelago of 572 islands, stretching over 700 kilometers, completely isolated out in the eastern waters of the Bay of Bengal. And here's what's so fascinating. These islands are located roughly 1,200 kilometers away from mainland India. But at their northernmost point, they are incredibly close to Myanmar, and at their southernmost tip, they are just about 150 kilometers away from the coast of Indonesia. It's this unique placement that makes them a total strategic outlier on the world map. Now, at first glance, the pristine beaches, the dense mangrove forests, and the coral reefs make this place look like the ultimate remote, untouched getaway. But beneath the surface of that idyllic tourism brochure lies the hard reality of 21st century naval warfare and power projection. This chain of islands actually functions as a highly sophisticated geopolitical watchtower. Because of how they're aligned geographically, they effectively create a natural maritime wall, pretty much dictating exactly who can easily enter and exit the waters of the Eastern Indian Ocean.
So why does that matter so much? Well, the primary reason for all this intense strategic value lies just to the southeast. It's the Strait of Malacca. And guys, this isn't just your standard waterway. It's a 900-kilometer stretch of ocean connecting the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Over 80,000 ships pass through this narrow corridor every single year. That is roughly one-third of all global maritime trade. It's basically the primary artery for the global economy, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are sitting right there at its western mouth.
To put that into perspective, the sheer volume of wealth and energy passing through this corridor is just staggering. We are talking about millions of barrels of oil transiting through there every single day. For massive manufacturing economies like China, Japan, and South Korea, this route provides vital, life-sustaining energy flows. So this isn't just about the cost of shipping flat-screen TVs, it's literally about national survival. Without the fuel and raw materials traveling through the Malacca Strait, these economic powerhouses would face catastrophic energy shortages and total gridlock within weeks.
What's really interesting is that historically, India actually viewed these distant islands as a bit of a logistical liability, just a remote territory that was super difficult to supply and defend. But as maritime strategies have evolved, that view has completely flipped. As experts note, the islands provide a strategic position deep inside the Eastern Indian Ocean. So instead of a vulnerability, they're now utilized as a forward-deployed springboard. They essentially let New Delhi push its defensive perimeter thousands of miles away from its own mainland coast, projecting influence right into Southeast Asia.
Which actually brings us to a really foundational concept in modern naval strategy, the Malacca Dilemma. This term was coined way back in 2003 by then Chinese President Hu Jintao, and it perfectly captures Beijing's deep strategic anxiety. See, China imports roughly 80% of its crude oil by sea, and the vast majority of that oil has to bottleneck right through the Malacca Strait. And because China doesn't have military control over this narrow, vulnerable corridor, they operate under the constant fear that, if a severe conflict were to break out, hostile navies could just choke off their primary energy supply.
To mitigate this huge vulnerability, China hasn't just been sitting on its hands. Their massive reliance on seaborne raw materials crossing the Indian Ocean has triggered a sweeping, multi-decade response. We're seeing a rapidly expanding Chinese naval presence all throughout the region. This ranges from anti-piracy task forces in the Gulf of Aden, which helps normalize their presence there, to sophisticated submarine patrols and major investments in deepwater ports across neighboring South Asian nations. Every single one of these moves is fundamentally tied to securing those long supply lines that eventually funnel into the Malacca Strait. Now, let's clear up a common myth right here. The idea that India's ultimate goal is to physically blockade the Strait of Malacca. In reality, attempting to close a strait that passes through the territorial waters of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore is a legal nightmare under international law, and practically, it's almost impossible to sustain. The actual strategy is way more sophisticated. It's entirely centered on continuous maritime domain awareness. Basically, they're using the islands to monitor every single commercial vessel and warship that approaches the strait, weaving together an impenetrable web of surveillance.
Recognizing the immense leverage this geography hands them, India has undergone a massive military paradigm shift. Back in 2001, they established the Andaman and Nicobar Command. And this wasn't just setting up another base. It became India's first and only integrated tri-service theater command. By bringing the Army, Navy, and Air Force together under one unified operational umbrella, India sent a very clear signal. This archipelago is no longer just a defensive outpost. It is the absolute central pillar of their maritime doctrine.
And they are putting serious money into matching that structural shift with heavy infrastructure development. We're seeing major extensions of runways at bases like Ines Baz. That upgrade lets them support heavy, long-range military aircraft like the P-8I Poseidon, which happens to be one of the most advanced submarine hunting planes on the planet. Alongside those expanded airfields and beefed-up naval docking facilities, India is laying down extensive underwater sensor networks. They are literally transforming the islands into an information-gathering fortress that can track even the quietest foreign submarines slipping into the Indian Ocean.
When we zoom out and look at the broader geopolitical architecture, the gravity of these islands multiplies big time. This brings us to the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or as it's commonly known, the Quad, featuring the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. For this strategic partnership, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands essentially serve as the westernmost anchor. They form the critical boundary line that monitors the main gateway connecting the Indian and Pacific Oceans. That makes them absolutely indispensable to the security calculations of all four of those nations.
The big, unifying objective of the Quad is maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific, basically ensuring that no single nation can restrict international maritime commerce. But what makes India's position so unique here is its commitment to strategic autonomy. Sure, New Delhi routinely signs logistics exchange memorandums and shares high-level intel with its Quad partners, heavily leveraging the strategic value of the islands. But crucially, India does all this while refusing to allow foreign troops to actually be stationed there. They're using their geography to ensure they remain an equal, heavyweight partner rather than just a subordinate ally.
It really completely changes how you perceive this territory, doesn't it? When you look at those lush tropical forests and quiet beaches, you have to realize you're simultaneously looking at overlapping radar nets, advanced anti-ship missile staging grounds, and a massive conduit for global oil. It is such a powerful juxtaposition. Right beneath the surface of a serene tropical getaway lies a dense, high-stakes nexus of global commerce and advanced military hardware, silently guarding one of the world's most vital maritime crossroads.
It's the ultimate proof of a timeless rule. In geopolitics, location beats size every single time. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands aren't some sprawling continent. Their total landmass is actually relatively small. Yet, their commanding position allows a localized military footprint to effectively dictate the maritime dynamics of millions of square miles of ocean. They cast a strategic shadow that extends all the way from the coast of Africa right to the shores of East Asia.
The transition of these islands from a forgotten, logistical afterthought to the geopolitical fulcrum of the 21st century is already well underway. The Indo-Pacific is rapidly rearming, and the power to observe and control its vital choke points is quite literally the power to shape the global economy. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I'll leave you to ponder this final, consequential question. As naval fleets expand and energy demands soar, what happens if the Indian Ocean becomes the next great arena of global competition? Think about that. And be sure to subscribe for more explainers on the hidden forces shaping our world.